A fashion consultant thought she was helping a struggling painter until she found out the truth that destroyed her world. Drop a comment with your location and rate this story 1 to 10. Enjoy the story. The morning sun filtered through the fire escape outside Emma Davis's third-floor apartment, casting geometric shadows across her meticulously organized closet. She stood before her full-length mirror, adjusting the collar of her crisp white blazer for the third time. In the fashion consulting world of Manhattan, first impressions weren't just important, they were everything. Emma had built her reputation one makeover at a time, transforming Wall Street executives from fashion disasters into boardroom legends. Her Greenwich Village apartment reflected her success. Minimalist furniture, a color-coordinated wardrobe that would make Vogue editors weep, and a coffee table adorned with the latest issues of Harper's Bazaar and GQ. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway, followed by what sounded like someone wrestling with keys. Anne glanced at her vintage Cartier watch, 8:47 a.m. She had exactly 13 minutes before her appointment with Marcus Chen, a hedge fund manager who desperately needed help choosing ties that didn't scream "I peaked in college." The fumbling outside continued, accompanied by a frustrated sigh that somehow carried through her solid oak door. Emma's curiosity got the better of her. She peered through the peephole and saw a man in his early 30s, struggling with an impressive collection of paint-stained canvas bags, a half-eaten bagel dangling from his mouth. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair that looked like it had been styled by a windstorm. His jeans were splattered with what appeared to be every color from a paint store explosion, and his grey hoodie had seen better decades. The man finally managed to unlock 3B, the apartment that had been vacant for months. "Great," Emma muttered, checking her reflection one more time. "A struggling artist. There goes the neighborhood's property values." She grabbed her leather portfolio and headed out, nearly colliding with her new neighbor as he attempted to maneuver what looked like a canvas the size of a small refrigerator through his doorway. Sorry, he said, the bagel nearly falling from his mouth. Up close, Anne could see paint under his fingernails and a smudge of blue on his cheek. "I'm Jake Sullivan, just moving in." "Emma Davis," she replied, extending her hand before immediately regretting it when she noticed the paint stains on his fingers. "Welcome to the building." Jake's smile was surprisingly warm, transforming his entire face. "Thanks. I promise I'm not usually this chaotic. Well, actually, that's not true. I'm pretty much always this chaotic." Emma couldn't help but notice his eyes, a striking green that seemed to hold secrets. But those eyes were framed by eyebrows that desperately needed professional attention, and his facial hair situation could only be described as accidental lumberjack. "Are you an artist?" she asked, though the answer was obvious from his paint-covered everything. "Something like that," Jake said, finally getting the canvas through the door. "What about you?" "Let me guess. Fashion industry?" Anne straightened her blazer. "Image consultant. I help people put their best foot forward, professionally speaking." "That's cool, I bet you're good at it." Jake gestured vaguely at her outfit. "You look like you stepped out of a magazine." "Thank you." Anne checked her watch again. "I should go. I have a client meeting." "Of course. Don't let me keep you from making someone beautiful." As Emma walked toward the subway station on West 4th Street, she couldn't shake the image of Jake's paint-stained fingers and that crooked smile. The poor guy clearly had no idea how to present himself to the world. In her experience, talented people often got overlooked simply because they didn't know how to package their gifts properly. The subway ride to Midtown gave her time to think. Marcus Chen's session went smoothly. They'd settled on a collection of silk ties that would make him look like the serious financier he was, rather than someone who'd wandered into Wall Street by accident. But throughout the consultation, Anne found herself thinking about her new neighbor. During her lunch break, she walked through Washington Square Park, watching the usual cast of characters: NYU students sprawled on benches, street musicians competing for attention, and the occasional chess master hustling tourists. The park always reminded her why she loved the village. It was a place where creativity and commerce coexisted, where someone could reinvent themselves daily. That's when it hit her. Jake Sullivan was a project waiting to happen. Emma had always been drawn to transformation stories. Growing up in Queens, she'd watched her mother work 3 jobs to keep them afloat, never having time or money for anything beyond the basics. Emma had sworn she'd never be in that position, and more importantly, she'd help others avoid it too. By the time she returned to her building that evening, Emma had formulated a plan. She knocked on Jake's door, armed with determination and a bottle of wine she'd picked up at the corner bodega. "Emma!" Jake opened the door, somehow managing to look even more disheveled than that morning. "What's up?" "I brought wine," she said, holding up the bottle. "Thought we could be neighborly." Jake's apartment was chaos incarnate. Canvases leaned against every available wall, some finished, others half-completed explosions of color. The smell of paint and turpentine mixed with something that might have been take-out Chinese food from several days ago. Despite the mess, there was something magical about the space. It felt alive, creative, full of possibilities. "Sorry about the mess," Jake said, clearing paint tubes from his small kitchen table. "I'm still settling in." "It's very artistic," Anne said diplomatically, accepting the wine glass he offered. The wine was good, surprisingly good for someone who looked like he lived on ramen noodles. They talked for hours. Jake was funny, self-deprecating, and surprisingly well-read. He told stories about his art school days, his struggles to find his voice as a painter, and his tendency to lose himself in his work for days at a time. "I know I'm not much to look at," Jake said, gesturing at his paint-stained clothes. "My ex-girlfriend used to say I dressed like a homeless person who'd won the lottery at a craft store." "Your ex-girlfriend sounds lovely," Emma said dryly. "She wasn't wrong, though. I get so focused on painting that I forget about everything else. Eating, sleeping, changing clothes." He laughed. "I once wore the same shirt for a week because I was working on this piece that I couldn't figure out." Emma saw her opening. "You know, Jake, I couldn't help but notice that you might benefit from a few small changes. Nothing dramatic, just some tweaks that could help you feel more confident." Jake raised an eyebrow. "You want to give me a makeover?" "I prefer to think of it as optimization," Emma said, "and I'd do it pro bono, consider it a housewarming gift." "You don't even know me. I know you're talented. I can see it in your work." Emma gestured at a painting of the Brooklyn Bridge that captured the morning light with breathtaking precision. "But talent isn't always enough. Sometimes we need to help the world see what we have to offer." Jake was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "You really think I need help?" "I think everyone can use a little help sometimes. Even me." "What kind of help do you need?" Emma paused, surprised by the question. I don't know. I guess I'm so focused on helping other people that I don't think about what I might be missing." "Maybe we can help each other," Jake said, raising his wine glass. "To unlikely neighbors." "To new beginnings," Emma countered, clinking her glass against his. As Emma walked back to her apartment that night, she felt a flutter of excitement she hadn't experienced in years. Jake Sullivan was going to be her greatest transformation yet. She just had to figure out how to convince him that success required more than just talent. It required presentation, confidence, and the willingness to let the world see who you really were. What Emma didn't know was that Jake Sullivan was already more successful than she could imagine, and her mission to save him was about to change both their lives in ways neither of them expected. Outside, the sounds of Greenwich Village continued their nightly symphony. Distant music from the clubs on Bleecker Street, the hum of late-night conversations from sidewalk cafes, and the gentle whisper of dreams being born in the city that never sleeps. Emma woke up Saturday morning with the kind of energy usually reserved for Black Friday shopping or the first day of Fashion Week. She had spent the previous evening researching men's fashion trends, creating mood boards, and plotting Jake's transformation with the precision of a military operation. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend, Sophia Reyes, who ran a boutique in Soho. "Heard you're taking on a charity case, need backup." Emma smiled as she typed back, "Not charity, community service. There's a difference." The truth was, Emma hadn't been this excited about a project in months. Her usual clients were cookie-cutter executives who wanted to look like every other cookie-cutter executive. Jake was different. He was a blank canvas with actual personality underneath all those paint stains. She knocked on Jake's door at precisely 10 a.m., armed with coffee from Joe Coffee on Waverly Place and a battle plan. "Morning sunshine," Jake said, opening the door in what appeared to be the same clothes from yesterday. His hair was sticking up at impossible angles, and there was a new streak of yellow paint on his cheek. "Please tell me that's caffeine." "Double shot," Emma said, handing him the cup. "We have work to do." Jake's apartment looked like a tornado had hit a paint factory. New canvases were scattered everywhere, and there were at least 3 different Chinese takeout containers on various surfaces. But what caught Emma's attention was the painting on his easel. A stunning portrait of an elderly woman feeding pigeons in what looked like Washington Square Park. "Jake, this is incredible," she said, moving closer to examine the brushwork. "The way you captured the light in her eyes." "Thanks," Jake said, suddenly shy. "I've been working on it all night. Sometimes I get in these zones where I can't stop." "That's dedication," Emma said, though she made a mental note to address his sleep schedule later. "But first, we need to talk about the basics." She pulled out her phone and showed him a photo she'd taken of him the day before. Jake winced. "Do I really look that disheveled?" "You look like a very talented artist who doesn't know how to present himself to the world," Emma said diplomatically, "which is exactly what we're going to fix." Their first stop was the Salvation Army on 8th Street. Emma had learned long ago that good style didn't require expensive clothes. It required understanding fit, color, and proportion. Plus, she suspected Jake's budget was limited, given his living situation. "I feel like I'm betraying my artistic integrity," Jake said as Anne held up a navy blazer against his frame. "Your artistic integrity will survive a properly fitted jacket," Emma replied. "Trust me." She selected a small collection of basics: well-fitted jeans, a few solid-colored t-shirts, a button-down shirt that brought out his eyes, and the navy blazer. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed makeover, just clothes that fit properly and worked with his natural coloring. "You know, I used to dress better," Jake said as they walked toward the fitting room, "back when I was trying to impress people." "What changed?" Jake shrugged. "I guess I stopped caring what people thought. Figured my art should speak for itself." "Your art is beautiful," Anne said, "but people can't see your art if they don't see you first." The transformation was immediate. When Jake emerged from the fitting room in the dark jeans and button-down shirt, Emma felt her breath catch. The clothes revealed the athletic build that had been hidden under baggy hoodies, and the blue shirt made his green eyes almost luminous. "Well?" Jake asked, looking uncomfortable under her scrutiny. "You look—" Emma paused, searching for the right words. "You look like yourself, but better. Is that good or bad?" "It's perfect." Their next stop was a small barber shop on McDougal Street that Emma had discovered years ago. Tony, the 70-year-old owner, took one look at Jake's hair and started muttering in Italian. "He's saying your hair has potential," Emma translated, though she didn't actually speak Italian. "You speak Italian?" Jake asked, impressed. "No, but I speak barber. It's a universal language." 45 minutes later, Jake's hair was transformed from artistic chaos to artfully tousled. Tony had trimmed the length, tamed the wildness, but left enough texture to maintain Jake's creative edge. "Madonna mia," Tony said, stepping back to admire his work. "Now you look like a man who could steal hearts." Jake caught Emma's eye in the mirror. "What do you think?" "I think Tony's right," Emma said, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. They spent the afternoon walking through the village, with Emma teaching Jake about posture, eye contact, and what she called confident navigation. "Walk like you own the sidewalk," she instructed as they strolled down Bleecker Street. "Not like you're apologizing for taking up space." "I don't apologize for taking up space," Jake protested. "Yes, you do. You slump your shoulders, you look at the ground, you step aside for everyone." "Watch," Emma demonstrated, walking with her shoulders back and her head held high. "Your turn." Jake tried to copy her posture, but it felt forced. "I feel like I'm pretending to be someone else." "You're not pretending. You're just letting people see the confidence that's already there." They practiced in front of the chess players in Washington Square Park, with Emma coaching Jake on making small talk with strangers. To her surprise, once he relaxed, Jake was naturally charming. He had a quick wit and a genuine interest in people that drew them in. "You're better at this than you think," Emma said as they sat on a bench, watching a street musician play guitar. "I'm better at it when I'm not thinking about it," Jake replied, "when I'm just being myself. That's the secret. Everything I'm teaching you is just about being the best version of yourself." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jake turned to Emma with a serious expression. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "I mean, really, you don't know me, you don't owe me anything." Emma considered the question. "I guess I see potential in you. And I hate seeing potential wasted. What if I don't want to change? What if I'm happy the way I am?" "Are you happy?" Emma asked quietly. Jake was quiet for a long moment. "I'm happy when I'm painting, but the rest of life, it's complicated. It doesn't have to be," says the woman who color coordinates her spice rack. Emma laughed. "How did you know about my spice rack?" "Lucky guess. You seem like someone who has her life perfectly organized." "Maybe too organized," Emma admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm so focused on helping other people figure out their lives that I'm missing out on my own. What would you do if you weren't helping me become a better version of myself?" Emma thought about it. "I honestly don't know. I've been so focused on my career, on building my business, that I haven't thought about what I actually want beyond that." "Maybe we're both projects," Jake said softly. As they walked back to their building, Emma realized that somewhere between the clothing store and the barber shop, something had shifted. This wasn't just about transforming Jake anymore. It was about two people figuring out who they wanted to be together. "Same time tomorrow?" Emma asked as they reached their floor. "Absolutely," Jake said, "but I'm cooking dinner. And before you say anything, I actually can cook. It's one of my hidden talents." "I'll bring wine," Emma said. "Deal." As Emma got ready for bed that night, she found herself thinking about the way Jake had looked at her in the barbershop mirror, and the way his smile had made her feel like she was the only person in the world. She was supposed to be helping him find confidence, but somehow he was helping her find something too. She just wasn't sure what it was yet. Outside her window, the village continued its Saturday night rhythm, and Emma fell asleep thinking about green eyes and the way Jake's hands moved when he talked about art. Paint-stained fingers that somehow seemed to hold magic. Sunday evening arrived with the kind of golden light that made Greenwich Village look like a movie set. Emma stood in front of her closet, holding up different outfits with the indecision of someone who suddenly cared very much about making the right impression. After 20 minutes of deliberation, she settled on dark jeans and a soft cashmere sweater, casual but elegant. She knocked on Jake's door at 7 sharp, carrying a bottle of Chianti and trying to ignore the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "Perfect timing," Jake said, opening the door. Emma's breath caught. He was wearing the navy blazer over a white t-shirt, and the transformation was striking. But it was his smile that made her heart skip. "You look," she started. "Like someone who might actually have his life together," Jake finished, grinning. "I was going to say handsome, but that works too." Jake's apartment had undergone its own transformation. The chaos of canvases had been organized into neat stacks, the takeout containers had disappeared, and the small dining table was set with actual plates and cloth napkins. Candles flickered on the windowsill, and the scent of garlic and herbs filled the air. "Jake, this is incredible," Emma said, looking around in amazement. "Don't give me too much credit. I just moved the mess to the bedroom," he said, leading her to the kitchen area. "But I figured if I'm going to be a better version of myself, I should probably learn to live like one." He was stirring something in a pan that smelled like heaven. "Osso buco," he explained. "My grandmother's recipe. She used to say that any man who couldn't cook was only half a man. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." "She was. She's also the one who taught me to paint." Jake's voice softened. "Said that art was about seeing the beauty in everyday things and helping other people see it too." Anne watched him cook, noting the confidence in his movements, the way he tasted and adjusted the seasoning with practiced ease. This was a different Jake than the scattered artist she'd met 2 days ago. Or maybe it was the same Jake, just with the layers of self-doubt peeled away. "Can I ask you something?" Anne said, accepting the glass of wine he offered. "Shoot." Why did you really agree to let me help you? I mean, most people would have been offended if a stranger showed up offering to change their appearance. Jake leaned against the counter, considering the question. Honestly? Because you saw something in me that I'd forgotten was there, and because... He paused, looking suddenly vulnerable. Because I was lonely. Really lonely. And you were the first person in a long time who seemed to actually care. The honesty in his voice made Anne's chest tight. I do care. More than I probably should, considering we just met. Maybe that's what makes it real, Jake said quietly. Dinner was a revelation. The ossobuco was restaurant quality, and Jake had paired it with a risotto that was creamy perfection. They talked about everything: childhood memories, favorite books, the way the city changed with the seasons. Emma found herself laughing more than she had in months. So let me get this straight, Jake said, refilling their wine glasses. You grew up in Queens, worked your way through FIT, and built your business from nothing? Pretty much. My mom cleaned office buildings at night to pay for my design classes. I swore I'd never let her sacrifice be wasted. That's incredible. You're like the American dream in a really good blazer. Emma laughed. What about you? Art school in the city? Pratt in Brooklyn. Then I spent a few years trying to figure out what I wanted to say with my art. Jake's expression grew distant. I had some early success, but then I got caught up in the whole scene. Galleries, critics, people telling me what kind of artist I should be. I burned out pretty badly. Is that why you moved here, to start over? Something like that. Jake stood up, clearing their plates. I needed to remember why I fell in love with painting in the first place. After dinner, Jake showed Emma more of his work. Each painting was a window into his soul, street scenes that captured the loneliness of urban life, portraits that revealed the hidden stories in people's faces, landscapes that found poetry in unexpected places. Jake, these are extraordinary, Emma said, studying a painting of the late-night crowd at a 24-hour diner. You should be in galleries. Maybe someday, Jake said, but there was something in his voice that Anne couldn't quite read. They ended up on his small balcony, overlooking the quiet Sunday evening street. The sounds of the village drifted up, distant music, laughter from a nearby restaurant, the gentle hum of the city settling into night. I have a confession, Emma said, the wine making her braver than usual. Should I be worried? When I first met you, I thought you were just another struggling artist who needed rescuing. But you're not struggling, are you? Not really. Jake was quiet for a long moment. What makes you say that? The wine you served yesterday was expensive, really expensive. The ingredients for tonight's dinner weren't cheap either. And your apartment, it's small, but it's in a great building in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city. You're very observant. It's part of my job, so what's the story, Jake Sullivan? Are you secretly a trust fund kid slumming it in the village? Jake laughed, but there was tension in it. Nothing that dramatic. I've been more successful than I let on. But success in the art world comes with complications. What kind of complications? The kind where people want to change you, mold you into what they think you should be. Where your art becomes a commodity instead of expression. Jake's hands gripped the balcony railing. I've been hiding out here, trying to find my way back to the artist I used to be. Anne felt a pang of something. Guilt, maybe, or understanding. And here I come, trying to change you all over again. No, Jake said quickly, turning to face her. That's different. You're not trying to change who I am. You're helping me remember who I could be. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Because you see me, not the potential profit margin or the marketing opportunity, just me. The space between them seemed to shrink. Emma could smell his cologne, something subtle and woody that suited him perfectly. His eyes were searching her face, and she realized they were standing very close. Emma, he said softly. Yes. I want to kiss you, but I should probably tell you that I'm completely falling for you, and that might complicate things. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. How much more complicated could it get? You'd be surprised, Jake said, but he was already leaning closer. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like a question being asked. But when Emma kissed him back, it deepened into something that felt inevitable, like they'd been moving toward this moment since the second they met. When they finally broke apart, Emma rested her forehead against his. "This is crazy," she whispered. "The best things usually are," Jake replied. They talked until nearly midnight, sharing stories and dreams and the kind of secrets that only emerge in the safety of darkness. When Emma finally went back to her apartment, she felt like she was floating. She fell asleep thinking about the way Jake's hands had felt tangled in her hair and the way he'd looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. She was falling hard and fast for her mysterious neighbor, and for the first time in years she didn't have a plan for what came next. What she didn't know was that Jake was lying awake in his own bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering how long he could keep his secret. Because the truth was more complicated than Emma could imagine, and when she found out who he really was, everything might change. Outside, the village settled into its quiet Sunday night rhythm, holding its breath for the revelations that Monday would bring. Monday morning brought the kind of autumn crispness that made New York feel like the center of the universe. Emma woke up with Jake's kiss still tingling on her lips and a smile that refused to leave her face. She hummed while making coffee, actually hummed, something she hadn't done since college. Her first client of the day was Patricia Williams, a senior partner at a law firm who needed help transitioning from intimidating courtroom dragon to approachable media spokesperson. Usually Emma would have been completely focused on the challenge, but today she found herself glancing at her phone, hoping for a text from Jake. "Earth to Emma," Patricia said, snapping her fingers. "You're glowing. New skincare routine or new man?" "New in perspective," Emma said diplomatically, though she could feel her cheeks warming. "Uh-huh. Well, whatever it is, bottle it. You look 10 years younger." The session went well, but Emma found herself distracted by thoughts of Jake. She wondered what he was painting today, whether he was thinking about her, whether last night had been as magical for him as it had been for her. During her lunch break, she decided to surprise him. She stopped by Dean and DeLuca on Broadway and picked up fresh fruit, artisanal cheese, and the kind of fancy crackers that cost more than most people's lunch. If Jake was going to cook for her, she could at least contribute to their growing tradition of sharing meals. She knocked on his door at 1 p.m., but there was no answer. She tried again, then remembered that Jake had mentioned getting lost in his work for hours at a time. She was about to leave when she heard muffled voices from inside. "Can't keep hiding forever, Jake. The gallery opening is in 3 weeks." Emma froze. The voice was crisp, professional, distinctly not Jake's. Not Jake's. "I'm not hiding, Marcus. I'm working." Jake's voice was strained. "Working on what? Pretty watercolors of street musicians. This isn't you, Jake. Where's the fire, the passion that made you famous?" "Famous?" Emma pressed closer to the door, her heart racing. "Maybe I don't want to be famous anymore," Jake said. "Maybe I want to create art that means something instead of art that sells." "Art that sells is art that reaches people. You have a responsibility to your collectors, to your career, to make you money, you mean, to honor your talent. Jake, you're one of the most important artists of your generation. You can't just disappear." Emma's mind reeled. Important artist. Generation. She thought about the expensive wine, the quality ingredients, the way Jake had seemed so comfortable with luxury. Pieces of a puzzle she hadn't even known existed began clicking into place. "I need more time," Jake said. "Time for what? To play house with your new girlfriend?" "Yes, I know about her. The neighbors talk." Emma's cheeks burned with embarrassment and anger. "Leave Emma out of this." Jake's voice was sharp now. "She has nothing to do with my work." "Doesn't she? Because from where I'm standing, ever since you started this little makeover project, your work has lost its edge. You're painting pretty pictures instead of challenging people. Maybe challenging people isn't everything. It is for you. It's who you are." There was a long pause. Emma knew she should leave, but she couldn't make herself move. "I'll think about it," Jake said finally. "Think fast. The Times critic is expecting to interview you next week about the retrospective and the collectors who bought your early pieces. They're getting restless." Emma heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly retreated to her apartment, her mind spinning. She set the food on her kitchen counter and tried to process what she'd just heard. Jake Sullivan wasn't just a struggling artist. He was apparently famous. Famous enough to have gallery openings and newspaper interviews and collectors buying his work. And he'd been lying to her about it. She spent the rest of the afternoon in a haze, going through the motions with her clients while her mind raced. By evening, she'd worked herself into a state of hurt confusion. When Jake knocked on her door at 7, she almost didn't answer. "Hey," he said, his smile faltering when he saw her expression. "Everything okay?" "I brought you lunch today," Emma said, not moving from her doorway. "But you had company." Jake's face went pale. "Emma, I can explain." "Explain what? That you're famous? That you've been lying to me since the day we met?" "I wasn't lying, I didn't tell you everything." "That's called lying, Jake. Or did they not cover that in famous artist school?" Jake ran his hands through his hair, destroying the careful styling Emma had helped him achieve. "Can I come in? Please?" Against her better judgment, Emma stepped aside. Jake walked to her living room but didn't sit down. Instead, he stood by the window, looking out at the street below. "My name is Jake Sullivan," he said quietly. "I'm 30 years old. I grew up in Boston, and I've been painting since I was 8. All of that is true. And the rest? And I had my first gallery show when I was 25. By the time I was 28, I was selling paintings for 6 figures. I have a penthouse in Soho, a house in the Hamptons, and more money than I know what to do with." Anne sank into her armchair, the weight of his words settling over her. "So why are you here? Why the tiny apartment, the paint-stained clothes, the whole struggling artist routine?" Jake turned to face her, and Anne saw something broken in his expression. "Because I lost myself," he said. "The art world, it's not what you think. It's politics and money and people telling you what to create so they can sell it. I was painting what they wanted, not what I felt. I was becoming everything I never wanted to be. So you decided to play pretend. I decided to disappear, to find my way back to why I started painting in the first place." Jake's voice was pleading now. "The apartment, the simple life. It wasn't an act. It was me trying to remember who I was before the fame." Anne felt tears prick her eyes. "And me? Was I part of the act too?" "No." Jake moved toward her, then stopped when she held up a hand. "Anne, meeting you was the best thing that's happened to me in years. You saw something in me that I'd forgotten existed. I saw someone who needed help, someone who was struggling. I was struggling, just not the way you thought. Do you have any idea how stupid I feel right now?" Emma's voice cracked. "I was so proud of myself for helping you, for giving you confidence. And all along you were probably laughing at me." "I was never laughing at you. Emma, what you did, it wasn't about the clothes or the haircut. You helped me remember what it felt like to be seen as a person, not a commodity. But you let me believe you were poor. You let me pay for things, choose cheap restaurants. I tried to pay. You insisted on helping, because I thought you needed it." They stared at each other across the room, the weight of misunderstanding settling between them. "I was going to tell you," Jake said. I didn't know how. And I was afraid that if you knew who I really was, you'd see me differently." "You're right, I would have. See? That's exactly what I was afraid of." Emma stood up, pacing to the window. "Jake, I build my business on helping people present their authentic selves to the world. How can I trust someone who's been presenting a false self to me? It wasn't false, it was just incomplete." "That's not the same thing." Jake was quiet for a long moment. "So what happens now?" Emma looked at him, really looked at him. The expensive clothes she'd thought were thrift store finds, the confident way he moved when he thought she wasn't watching, the casual knowledge of fine wine and gourmet food. How had she missed it? "I don't know," she said honestly. "I need time to think." "Emma, please, don't let this ruin what we have." "What do we have, Jake? Because I'm not sure anymore." Jake's shoulders sagged. "I understand. I'll give you space." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, these past few days have been the happiest I've been in years. And not because of the makeover, because of you." After he left, Emma sat in her darkened apartment, staring at the wall that separated her from Jake's secret life. She felt like she'd been living in a romantic comedy, only to discover she was actually in a completely different movie. Outside her window, the village continued its eternal dance of dreams and disappointments. while Emma tried to figure out whether the man she was falling for was real or just another beautiful illusion in a city full of them. 3 days passed without a word between Emma and Jake. 3 days of awkward hallway encounters where they both pretended to be fascinated by their phones. 3 days of Emma hearing Jake's music through the walls and wondering if he was painting his heartbreak. 3 days of sleepless nights where she replayed every conversation they'd had, looking for clues she'd missed. On Thursday morning, Sophia burst into Emma's apartment with coffee and pastries from Balthazar, taking one look at her best friend's appearance and shaking her head. "Mija, you look like you've been hit by a truck carrying broken dreams," Sophia said, setting the food on Emma's coffee table. "Spill." Emma had been holding everything in for days, and the floodgates opened. She told Sophia everything: the makeover project, the growing feelings, the overheard conversation, and Jake's confession about being a successful artist. Wait, Sophia interrupted, holding up a manicured hand. "Jake Sullivan? As in the Jake Sullivan?" Emma blinked. "You know who he is." Sophia pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. "Anne, honey, you need to see this." She turned the phone screen toward Emma, showing an article from ART News titled, "Jake Sullivan, the Vanishing Act of New York's Most Promising Young Artist." Emma's hands trembled as she took the phone. The article was from 6 months ago, featuring a large photo of Jake at a gallery opening. But this wasn't the Jake she knew. This Jake was clean-shaven, wearing a tailored tuxedo, his hair perfectly styled. He looked sophisticated, untouchable, every inch the successful artist. Sullivan's controversial piece, American Dreams for Sale, sold for $1.2 million at auction last spring. Emma read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. But the artist has been notably absent from the scene since then, leading to speculation about his next move. "Keep reading," Sophia urged gently. Known for his provocative commentary on wealth inequality and social justice, Sullivan's work has been both praised and criticized for its unflinching examination of American society. His last exhibition, Invisible People, featured portraits of homeless individuals painted with the same technique typically reserved for society portraits, forcing viewers to confront their own prejudices about who deserves to be seen. Emma set the phone down, feeling sick. "Sophia, his paintings sell for over $1 million. I was giving him fashion advice and buying him coffee, and he let you because he's clearly crazy about you," Sophia said firmly. "Emma, think about this from his perspective. When was the last time someone saw Jake the person instead of Jake the commodity? That's what he said. Because it's true. Look at this article. It's all about his market value, his controversy, his brand. Where does it talk about his art as art? Where does it mention that he's obviously a talented, sensitive person who makes incredible osso buco?" Despite everything, Anne smiled slightly. "You would focus on the cooking. I focus on what matters. And what matters is that this man, famous or not, is head over heels for you and you're head over heels for him. But he lied to me, Sophia. He omitted. There's a difference." "How is there a difference?" Sophia sat back on the couch, choosing her words carefully. "When I first started my boutique, remember how I used to dress down when I went to get fabrics in the garment district? You said it was because they treated you differently if they thought you had money." "Exactly. They saw dollar signs instead of a person who genuinely loved fashion. Jake was doing the same thing, protecting himself from people who might want to use him." Emma stared out her window at the building across the street, where someone was hanging laundry on a fire escape. Normal people doing normal things, while her life felt anything but normal. "I need to understand something," Emma said slowly. "That conversation I overheard. His manager was saying that Jake's recent work has lost its edge since he met me. What if I'm bad for his art? Or what if his art is evolving because he's happy for the first time in years?" Before Emma could respond, there was a knock at the door. Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Expecting someone?" Emma opened the door to find a delivery man holding an enormous bouquet of sunflowers, at least 3 dozen of them, bright and wild, and completely unlike the sophisticated arrangements she was used to receiving from grateful clients. "Emma Davis?" the delivery man asked. "That's me." The card attached was simple. These reminded me of you, bright, beautiful, and impossible to ignore. J. Well, Sophia said, peering over Emma's shoulder. The man has good taste in apologies. They're just flowers. Honey, those are not just flowers, those are, I'm sorry I broke your heart, please give me another chance flowers, there's a difference. Emma set the vase on her kitchen counter, and despite her hurt feelings, she couldn't help but smile. The sunflowers were perfect, cheerful and unpretentious and completely Jake. Her phone buzzed with a text. Meet me at the Tenement Museum at 2 p.m. I want to show you something. J. Sophia read the message over her shoulder. You're going. I didn't say that. You're going because you're curious and because you're still crazy about him and because you know that hiding in your apartment isn't going to solve anything. Emma looked at her reflection in the hallway mirror. Sophia was right. She looked terrible. Her hair was limp, her eyes were red from crying, and she was wearing sweatpants that had seen better decades. If I go, Anne said slowly, I'm not going as the woman who was trying to fix him. I'm going as someone who deserves the truth. Now you're talking. 2 hours later, Emma stood outside the Tenement Museum on Orchard Street, watching tourists stream in and out of the building that preserved the stories of immigrant families who had lived in the Lower East Side a century ago. She spotted Jake before he saw her. He was sitting on a bench across the street back in his paint-stained clothes, looking more like the man she'd first met than the polished artist from the magazine photos. When he saw her, his face lit up with relief and something that looked like hope. You came, he said, standing up. I almost didn't. But you did. That has to count for something. They walked into the museum together, maintaining careful distance between them. Jake led her through the recreated apartments, past the stories of families who had come to America with nothing and built lives through sheer determination. My great-grandfather lived in a place like this, Jake said as they stood in a cramped kitchen that had housed a family of 8. He came here from Ireland with a bag of paints and a head full of dreams. Is that why you wanted to show me this? Partly. Jake turned to face her. Emma, I know you think I was lying to you about who I am, but this is who I am. My success, the money, the fame, that's what I do, not who I am. But it's part of you, a big part. Is it? Because for the past week I've felt more like myself than I have in years, and that's because of you. They moved through the museum in relative silence, each lost in their own thoughts. It wasn't until they reached the final exhibit, a display about families torn apart and reunited by the immigrant experience, that Jake spoke again. I have something to tell you, he said. Something I should have told you from the beginning. Anne's heart clenched. What now? Next week there's going to be a retrospective of my work at the Whitney. It's been planned for months. There will be reporters, critics, collectors, the whole circus. And I want you to come with me. Not as my image consultant, not as the woman who fixed me, but as the woman I'm falling in love with. The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable and terrifying. Jake, I know I hurt you by not telling you everything. I know I made you feel foolish and I hate myself for that. But Emma, you didn't fix me. You helped me remember who I was underneath all the noise. Emma looked at him, really looked at him. This close, she could see the vulnerability in his eyes, the way his hands shook slightly as he waited for her answer. If I say yes, she said slowly, I need to know that there won't be any more surprises, no more half-truths or omissions. I promise. And I need to know that you're not just caught up in the novelty of someone who doesn't know your reputation. Emma, I've met plenty of people who don't know my reputation. What I haven't met is someone who sees me, really sees me, and likes what she finds. Even the paint-stained, disorganized parts? Especially those parts. Emma felt her resolve crumbling. This is crazy. A week ago I thought you were a struggling artist who needed my help. And now? And now I think you're a successful artist who might need my help in completely different ways. Jake's smile was tentative but genuine. So you'll come to the opening? Emma thought about the magazine photos, the intimidating world of high-end art galleries, the sophisticated people who would be there. Then she thought about Jake's osso buco, his terrible morning hair, and the way he kissed her like she was the only woman in the world. "I'll come," she said, "but I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. I wouldn't want you to. And you're not pretending either. No more hiding, Jake, from anyone. Deal." As they walked back toward the village together, Emma realized that maybe the real transformation hadn't been about changing Jake's appearance. Maybe it had been about both of them learning to be honest about who they really were. Not pretending either. No more hiding, Jake. From anyone. Deal. As they walked back toward the village together, Anne realized that maybe the real transformation hadn't been about changing Jake's appearance. Maybe it had been about both of them learning to be honest about who they really were. The hardest part, she suspected, was still ahead of them. The night of Jake's retrospective at the Whitney Museum arrived with the kind of electric energy that only New York could generate. Emma stood in front of her closet for the third time that evening, surrounded by rejected outfits and the growing certainty that she was about to make a terrible mistake. Sophia sat on Emma's bed, painting her nails a bold red and offering commentary on each fashion choice. "The black dress makes you look like you're going to a funeral," Sophia said without looking up. "The blue one makes you look like you're trying too hard to blend in. And the burgundy one makes me look like I'm trying too hard to stand out," Emma finished. "Sophia, what am I doing? I don't belong in Jake's world." "Whose world do you belong in?" "I don't know anymore." Sophia capped her nail polish and fixed Emma with a stern look. "Listen to me, Mija. You belong wherever you choose to belong. You built a business from nothing. You've transformed dozens of people's lives, and you're smart enough to see through the BS in any room. Don't you dare shrink yourself because you're intimidated." Anne pulled out a simple black sheath dress, elegant but not flashy, sophisticated but not trying too hard. "This one. Perfect. Now stop overthinking and start getting ready to support the man you love." "I never said I loved him." "You didn't have to." An hour later, Emma met Jake outside his building. She barely recognized him, gone were the paint-stained clothes and tousled hair. This Jake wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his hair styled with subtle precision, his presence commanding in a way that made her understand why he was successful. But when he saw her, his nervous smile was pure Jake Sullivan, artist next door. "You look incredible," he said, offering her his arm. "You clean up pretty well yourself," Emma replied, trying to ignore the butterflies in her stomach. "Are you ready for this?" Jake asked as their taxi pulled up to the Whitney's imposing facade. "Are you?" "Honestly, no, but I'm glad you're here." The Whitney Museum at night was a different creature than during the day. Lit from within, it glowed like a beacon against the darkening sky, and the sidewalk outside buzzed with people in expensive clothes arriving for the opening. Anne recognized the type immediately: gallery owners, collectors, critics, the kind of people who spoke in art world code and wore their sophistication like armor. Jake, a woman with silver hair and an accent that sounded vaguely European, appeared the moment they entered. "Darling, where have you been hiding? We've been absolutely desperate to see what you've been working on." "Hello, Isabella," Jake said, his voice carefully polite. "This is Emma Davis." Isabella's eyes swept over Emma with the practiced assessment of someone used to categorizing people by their net worth. "Charming," she said, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Are you in the arts, dear?" "I'm an image consultant," Emma replied, lifting her chin slightly. "How unpractical," Isabella said, already turning back to Jake. "Now you simply must tell me about this mysterious new direction in your work. Marcus mentioned you've been exploring more accessible themes." Anne watched Jake's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "I've been exploring what interests me," he said. Of course. But surely you understand that your collectors have certain expectations." Emma felt a surge of protectiveness for Jake. She'd seen that look before, the polite mask that people wore when they were being reduced to their market value. "Excuse me," she said smoothly, "but I think what makes Jake's work so powerful is exactly that unpredictability. Great art challenges expectations, doesn't it?" Isabella's smile became even more brittle. "How refreshing. If you'll excuse us, I need to steal Jake away. There are some very important people who want to meet him." And just like that, Emma found herself alone in a crowd of strangers. watching Jake be led away like a prize poodle at a dog show. She wandered through the gallery, studying Jake's paintings with new eyes. Now that she knew the story behind them, she could see the evolution of his work, from the earlier pieces that crackled with anger and social commentary to the newer works that seemed softer, more hopeful. There was one painting in particular that made her stop in her tracks, a street scene from Greenwich Village showing an elderly man feeding pigeons while young couples walked hand in hand in the background. "That's new," said a voice behind her. Emma turned to see a man in his 50s with kind eyes and an expensive but rumpled suit. "I'm David Chen from The Times. You must be the mysterious girlfriend we've all heard about." "Word travels fast," Emma said. "In this world, everything travels fast, especially rumors about why one of our most provocative artists suddenly started painting, well, this." He gestured at the painting. "What's wrong with it?" "Nothing's wrong with it. It's beautiful." But it's not what people expect from Jake Sullivan. His earlier work was all about confronting uncomfortable truths, the pieces that made people squirm in their seats and question their assumptions. Anne studied the painting again. Maybe he's questioning different assumptions now. Maybe. Or maybe he's lost his edge. Before Emma could respond, she heard Jake's laugh across the room, but not the genuine laugh she'd fallen in love with. This was his public laugh, polished and careful. She turned to see him surrounded by a group of people, nodding and smiling while a woman with perfectly blown-out hair gestured animatedly at one of his paintings. "The thing about artists," David continued, "is that their personal lives become part of their mythology. Take Jake. Half his appeal was the tortured genius angle. Women wanted to save him, men wanted to be him, collectors wanted to own a piece of his pain. That's horrible. That's the art world. The question is, what happens when the tortured genius finds happiness? Does the art suffer?" Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the museum's air conditioning. "I should go find Jake." She made her way through the crowd, catching fragments of conversations about market trends and investment potential, and which pieces would hold their value. By the time she reached Jake, he was deep in conversation with a collector who was asking about commissioning a piece in the style of your earlier work. "Emma!" Jake's relief was palpable when he saw her. "This is Harrison Blake, one of my longtime collectors. Harrison, this is Emma." Harrison shook her hand with the enthusiasm of someone used to networking. "Emma, Jake's been telling us all about you. So wonderful that he's found someone who appreciates his artistic journey." The way he said artistic journey made it sound like a euphemism for something embarrassing. "I appreciate Jake," Emma said simply. Of course, though I have to say, I'm hoping this new direction is just a phase. Jake's social commentary pieces, now those were investments. This new work is pretty, but where's the bite? Where's the controversy that made him famous?" Anne felt Jake tense beside her. "Sometimes artists grow beyond their early work," she said. "Growth is one thing," Harrison replied, "but you don't fix what isn't broken, if you know what I mean." Emma knew exactly what he meant, and she hated every implication of it. The evening continued in a blur of similar conversations. Emma watched Jake smile and nod and give the right answers, while people dissected his art like stock picks. She saw how he gradually retreated into himself, how his genuine enthusiasm got buried under layers of professional courtesy. It wasn't until they were in the taxi heading home that either of them spoke honestly. "I'm sorry," Jake said quietly. "For what?" "For subjecting you to that, for letting you see what my world is really like." Emma looked out the window at the familiar streets of their neighborhood. "Is that what you're going back to? That world?" "I don't know. Tonight felt like wearing clothes that don't fit anymore." "Then don't wear them." "It's not that simple, Anne. Those people, that world, it's how I make my living, how I've built my career. What if you built something different?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. "What if I can't? What if removing myself from all of that means my work loses its power? What if it means your work finds a different kind of power?" When they reached their building, they stood awkwardly in the hallway between their apartments, the weight of the evening settling between them. "Thank you for coming tonight," Jake said. "I know it wasn't easy." "Jake, can I ask you something?" "Anything." When you were painting those new pieces, the street scenes, the portraits of regular people, were you thinking about market value, or were you thinking about what you wanted to say? I was thinking about what I wanted to say. Then trust that. Trust yourself. Jake stepped closer to her, his hands finding her face. What if trusting myself means losing everything I've worked for? What if it means finding something better? He kissed her then, soft and desperate and full of questions neither of them could answer. When they broke apart, Anne rested her forehead against his. I need to tell you something, she whispered. What? I think I'm falling in love with the real you. Not the famous artist, not the project I thought I was fixing, but the man who makes incredible ossobuco and sees beauty in street musicians. Even if that man comes with complications, especially then. As Anne fell asleep that night, she couldn't shake the feeling that their real test was just beginning. Because love was one thing, but love in the face of an entire world that wanted to change them both, that was something else entirely. 3 weeks after the Whitney opening, Emma woke to the sound of music coming through the walls, but not Jake's usual playlist. This was classical, something melancholy and beautiful that seemed to seep into her bones. She hadn't seen him since the gallery opening, though she'd heard him moving around at all hours, and she'd noticed several expensive cars pulling up to the building at odd times. She was making her morning coffee when her phone rang. Sophia's name flashed on the screen. Have you seen the Times? Sophia's voice was tight with concern. Good morning to you too, and no, why? Check the arts section, now. Emma pulled up the newspaper on her tablet, and her heart sank. The headline read, Jake Sullivan's Creative Crisis, When Love Conquers Art. Below it was a photo of Jake and Emma from the Whitney opening, and another photo of one of his recent paintings. Sources close to the artist suggest that Sullivan's recent work lacks the provocative edge that made him famous, Emma read aloud, her voice growing smaller with each word. The influence of his new girlfriend, image consultant Emma Davis, appears to have softened both his appearance and his artistic vision. While some collectors appreciate the accessible nature of his recent pieces, critics worry that Sullivan has lost the anger that fueled his most important work. Keep reading, Sophia said gently. When asked about the change in his work, Sullivan's gallerist Marcus Webb commented, Jake is at a crossroads. We're hoping he'll rediscover the passion that made him one of the most important voices of his generation. Meanwhile, sales of Sullivan's recent work have been notably slower than his earlier pieces, raising questions about the commercial viability of his new direction. Emma set the tablet down, feeling sick. Sophia, they're blaming me for ruining his career. They're looking for someone to blame because they don't understand that artists are allowed to evolve. But what if they're right? What if I have been bad for his art? Before Sophia could answer, there was a knock at Emma's door. She opened it to find Jake looking like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was messy again, but not in the charming way she'd grown to love. This was the hair of someone who'd been running his hands through it in frustration. Have you seen the article? He asked without preamble. Just finished reading it. Emma, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to be dragged into this. It's not your fault. She stepped aside to let him in, noting the dark circles under his eyes. Jake, you look terrible. I feel terrible. I haven't been able to paint anything worthwhile since the opening. It's like they're right, like I've lost whatever made my work matter. Emma felt her heart break a little. That's not true, isn't it? I used to paint with this fire, this anger at injustice. Now I paint street musicians and couples in parks, pretty pictures that don't challenge anyone. What's wrong with beauty? What's wrong with hope? Jake slumped onto her couch, burying his face in his hands. My gallerist wants me to do a series about wealth inequality again. Says that's what sells, what makes statements, and maybe he's right. And what do you want to paint? I don't know anymore. I used to know exactly what I wanted to say. Now I'm second-guessing everything. Emma sat beside him, close enough to smell his familiar scent of paint and turpentine. Jake, when you painted that portrait of the woman feeding pigeons, what were you thinking about? I was thinking about dignity, about how she was invisible to most people, but she had this quiet grace, this purpose. That sounds like a statement to me. But it's not angry enough. It's not confrontational. Emma was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. What if your art is evolving because you're evolving? What if finding happiness doesn't make your work less important? It just makes it different. What if different means irrelevant? What if different means you're growing as an artist and as a person? Jake looked at her with those green eyes that had first caught her attention. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Always. Do you think I should go back to making the kind of work that made me successful, even if it means becoming someone I don't want to be anymore? Emma felt the weight of the question. She thought about the gallery opening, the way Jake had looked surrounded by people who saw him as a commodity. She thought about the joy on his face when he painted the street scenes, the peace she'd seen in him during their quiet dinners. I think, she said slowly, that you should make the art that comes from your heart, regardless of what anyone else thinks, including me, even if it means financial failure. Jake, you have enough money to live comfortably for the rest of your life. The question isn't whether you can afford to follow your artistic vision, the question is whether you can afford not to. Jake was quiet for a long time. Then he stood up, pacing to her window that overlooked the street below. I keep thinking about something you said that first night we had dinner, he said. You asked me if I was happy, and I said I was happy when I was painting. But that wasn't completely true. What do you mean? I was happy when I was painting what I wanted to paint, not what people expected me to paint. And lately I've been so worried about everyone else's expectations that I've forgotten what I actually want to create. Emma joined him at the window. Below them, the village was coming to life. People walking dogs, grabbing coffee, living their ordinary, beautiful lives. So what do you want to create? She asked. Jake was quiet for so long that Emma thought he might not answer. Then he smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in weeks. I want to paint truth, but not just the hard truths, the angry truths. I want to paint the truth of a couple sharing breakfast on a Sunday morning, the truth of an old man feeding pigeons, the truth of finding love when you weren't looking for it. That sounds like exactly what you should be doing. Even if it means starting over professionally. Especially then. Jake turned to face her fully. Emma, there's something else I need to tell you. Emma's heart skipped. What now? I've been thinking about what you said, about being authentic, and I realize that I haven't been completely authentic with you either. Jake, not about my career, about my feelings. Emma, I'm not falling in love with you. I've already fallen, completely, irrevocably, head over heels in love with you. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. Jake, and I know this is crazy because we've only known each other for a month, but I can't imagine my life without you in it. Not because you've changed me, but because you've helped me remember who I really am. You ridiculous, wonderful man, Emma said, tears flowing freely now. I love you too. I love your messy hair and your paint-stained clothes and the way you see beauty in everything. I love that you make me question what I think I know about success and happiness. Jake cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. So what do we do now? Now we figure it out together. You paint what your heart tells you to paint, and I'll support you. And if the art world doesn't like it, then maybe it's time to find a new art world. What about your business, your reputation? Dating a commercially unsuccessful artist probably isn't great for your image. Emma laughed through her tears. You know what? Maybe it's time I stopped worrying so much about images and started focusing on what's real. And what's real? This, us. The fact that we make each other better people. Jake kissed her then, soft and sure and full of promise. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I have an idea, he said. What if we both take a risk? What kind of risk? What if I stop trying to be the artist everyone expects me to be, and you stop trying to be the perfect image consultant who has all the answers? And then what? And then we see what happens when two people decide to be completely, authentically themselves. Emma thought about it, really thought about it. She thought about the pressure she put on herself to be perfect, to have the right answer for every client's problem, to maintain an image of having her life completely together. She thought about how liberating it might be to admit that she was still figuring things out too. "Okay," she said, "let's do it." "Yeah? Yeah, but I have one condition." "Anything. Promise me that we'll always be honest with each other. No more half-truths, no more omissions. If we're doing this, we're doing it with complete transparency." "I promise. Do you promise something too?" "What?" "Promise me that if I paint something terrible, you'll tell me it's terrible." Emma laughed. "I promise. Though I doubt you're capable of painting anything terrible. You'd be surprised. I once painted a portrait of my ex-girlfriend that made her look like a demented poodle. Now that I have to see. It was destroyed in a tragic painting accident." "How convenient." 6 months later, Emma stood in a small gallery in the East Village watching people respond to Jake's new exhibition. The space was intimate, nothing like the sterile grandeur of the Whitney, and the crowd was different too. Younger artists, local residents, people who seemed more interested in the art than the artist's market value. The exhibition was called Ordinary Grace, and it featured Jake's recent work, the street scenes, the portraits of everyday people, the moments of quiet beauty that most people overlooked. The reviews had been mixed, with some critics calling it a departure from his important early work, while others praised its maturity and emotional depth. But what mattered most to Emma was the way Jake looked as he moved through the gallery, relaxed, genuine, happy, in a way she'd never seen him at the Whitney opening. "Excuse me," said a young woman with paint-stained fingers and earnest eyes. "Are you Emma Davis?" "I am." "I'm Sarah Chen. I'm a painter. I just wanted to say, this work, Jake's new direction, it's incredible. It's given me permission to paint joy instead of just pain, you know." Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest. "That's wonderful. You should tell Jake. He's right over there." As Sarah walked away, Emma realized that maybe success wasn't about market value or critical acclaim. Maybe it was about creating work that spoke to people, that gave them permission to see beauty in their own lives. "Hey, beautiful," Jake said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of wine. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about how proud I am of you," Emma said, "and how happy I am that we took the risk. No regrets about dating a commercially unsuccessful artist." Emma looked around the gallery, at the people genuinely moved by Jake's work, at the young artists inspired to try something new, at Jake himself, glowing with the satisfaction of creating something true. "You know what I think," she said. "What?" "I think you're more successful now than you've ever been. You're just measuring success differently." Jake set down his wineglass and pulled her into his arms, right there in the middle of the gallery. "I love you, Emma Davis," he said. "I love you too, Jake Sullivan. Even if I never sell another painting. Even then, though something tells me you're going to be just fine." As if to prove her point, Emma noticed a small red dot appearing next to one of Jake's paintings, the Universal Gallery symbol for sold. Then another, and another. "Jake," she said, pointing. He looked, and his face broke into the kind of smile that could light up the entire village. "Maybe there's room in the art world for truth after all," he said. "Maybe there's room in every world for truth," Emma replied. Outside the gallery, Greenwich Village continued its eternal dance of dreams and possibilities, while inside, 2 people who had found love by learning to be themselves celebrated the fact that sometimes the best transformations happen when you stop trying to change and start trying to simply be. 6 months later, Jake would propose to Emma in Washington Square Park, in front of the chess players and street musicians who had unknowingly become part of their love story. She would say yes, of course, and they would plan a wedding that was small and authentic and perfectly them. But that night, surrounded by art that came from the heart and people who understood its value, they were content to hold each other and know that they had found something rarer than fame or fortune. They had found the courage to be completely, authentically themselves together. And that, Emma thought as Jake spun her around the gallery floor, was the most beautiful transformation of all.